Hi, I'm Dr. Sridhar Kalyanasundaram, consultant neonatologist working in Dubai. I'll be discussing neonatal infections. Obviously, when we say neonatal infections, the focus is mainly on bacterial infections, but we'll try to get an overview of other infections as well. So, we will discuss the following points. What is sepsis? Why are babies susceptible to infection? How can we prevent infection? And then we have a discussion on bacterial, viral, and fungal causes. What are the investigations we can do to diagnose sepsis, and how will you manage, and what is the outcome? Infections are an important cause of neonatal morbidity and mortality, and it's a common cause of NICU admission, and it lengthens the stay as well and increases the cost of treatment. There is a much higher incidence of sepsis in the premature babies. Starting antibiotics promptly is very important and is often life-saving. So it's difficult to define the exact incidence of sepsis because many are not picked up on time, and there are also many non-infectious causes which are labeled as sepsis because of the overlapping clinical features. So sepsis is nothing but systemic manifestations of the bloodstream infection and the associated inflammatory process. So there is a systemic inflammatory response, and the incidence can be 2 per 1,000 live births with culture proven sepsis, and 80% of them is bacterial. 20% is perinatally acquired viral infections. Fungal infections are rare, and they are more common in the extreme preterm babies, especially associated with spontaneous intestinal perforation and such complications. Sepsis is obviously much higher with prematurity. 26 out of 1,000 preterm infants with birth weight less than 1,000 grams have sepsis, and 8 to 9 per 1,000 preterm births with a birth weight of 1,000 to 2,000 gram have infection. So we have different factors which focus on the incidence of sepsis. We have the background factors of the organism, so the virulence, infectivity, susceptibility or resistance to antibiotics. Host factors which include innate immunity, how effective it is. So the preterm baby has a thin skin, poor barriers, and less immunity. Active and passive immune response, which is again very poor in the preterm babies. General condition of the baby and nutrition. And the environmental factors, the hygiene, mainly the hand washing of the personnel concerned. Temperature, ambient temperature leads, as in many warm countries, we would feel that there is a reduction in sepsis during the winter months. Fomites lead to spread of infection similar to hand hygiene and contact with infections. The organism factors, majority of the infections are bacterial. Gram-negative infections are very serious, and the gram-negative bacteria stain pink on the gram stain. They have the endotoxin or peptidoglycan, which is associated with endotoxic shock. You can have rods, gram-negative rods like Klebsiella and E. coli, or you can have gram-negative cocci like gonococcus and meningococcus. Gram-positive infections are also fairly common, especially the group B streptococcus, which is common in the perinatal stages. Maternal carriage of group B streptococcus happens in varying proportions in populations, and about 25% of babies are at risk of group B streptococcal infection, and that's why in Western countries there is a screening protocol for the same. And the cocci can be in clusters, in which case it's Staphylococcus, mainly Staph aureus, and you may have Coagulase negative staph or Staph epidermidis and other types as a source of hospital-acquired infections. We also have gram-positive bacilli rarely, and Clostridium species and Listeria are the common types. Organisms may cause more serious infection if they have mechanisms for antibiotic resistance. So this can happen by selection of mutants and spread of resistance trait by plasmid or bacteriophage. The MRSA, which is methicillin-resistant staphylococcus, is a notorious cause of wound infection in hospitals, and it can cause serious infections. Extended spectrum beta-lactamase producing gram-negative infections are very common causes of urinary tract infection and other complications, and it leads to more widespread use of the broader spectrum treatments we have spared against these organisms like meropenem. So we have to judiciously use antibiotics. We should avoid unnecessary use of the broader spectrum or the top antibiotics, and we should stop at the earliest possible. We should rationalize the antibiotic treatment based on sensitivity as best as we can. What are the host factors in the neonate? All neonates are relatively immunocompromised because their immune system is naive. They have immature and ineffective antibodies, complements, neutrophils, the skin and mucosal barriers. The sicker, more preterm neonates need more interventions, and you have breach of the barriers. Even though the barriers themselves are weak, you may breach them multiple times as well for your cannulations or sampling or suction. So the barriers include the skin, the mucous membrane, and you have the innate immunity at these layers like the neutrophils and phagocytes which circulate. And the chemotaxic response brings them to a focus of injury, which tries to prevent further infection spreading. And you have passive immunities, which are through the acquired antibodies from the mother, and active immunity with memory with the T cell and B cell mediated memory response. The immature skin and mucosal surfaces have thinner layers of the stratum corneum. The junctions between the cells are poorly bound, and secretory IgA is reduced. In addition, the monitoring tapes, leads, and the procedures break the skin barrier. And the umbilical cord is often a source of seeding, and colonization with pathogens may lead to infection at the umbilical level. Use of plastic like cannulas and taping central lines, because the plastic coagulase negative staph tends to form a biofilm layer on the lining, and that may lead to the infection persisting, and removing the line may be the only option to treat it effectively. Repeated bloodletting and accessing lines, and repeated oral, nasal, or endotracheal suction are also reasons. So even in a relatively stable baby who is only on nasal cannula oxygen or high flow, if you repeatedly suction the nose, you are breaking the barrier, and the bacteria may enter into the bloodstream and cause infection. So this is to show that the neutrophils in the premature babies are immature with reduced chemotaxis, reduced deformability, reduced phagocytosis, and the storage pool in the newborns is only 2-fold compared to 14-fold reserve in adults. So you have a weak innate defense system. The phagocytes, there is a neutrophil surge. This is a Monro count, which shows in a normal baby between 6 to 24 hours. There is a surge in the neutrophil count, and then absolute neutrophil count drops. When there is a stress response, the bone marrow releases the immature neutrophils. So these are the band cells, which can be counted as the mature-to-immature neutrophil ratio, and this may be a guide to stress or like infection. So it's a marker of infection. Antibodies, which are passive immunity, happen from maternal transfer of the IgG antibodies against organisms that the mother is immune to. Antibody transfer increases with gestational age, and mostly it's during the 3rd trimester. There is no guarantee that the maternal antibodies are present to the infecting organism that is there in the baby. And this is an illustration of the immunoglobulin levels in the newborn. So the initial few months, the IgG is purely from the maternal source. As you can see, the transfer starts in the 4th to 5th month and then peaks by 8 months. And so a premature baby may be lacking in this. And after that, after the birth, IgM, IgA, and then the newborn's own IgG is produced. The other protective factors are the complement factors in the bloodstream, and breast milk has its own protective factors in various forms. IgA antibodies on the mucosal surface and the gastric acid barrier. So this is important to remember that medications that affect the gastric acid barrier, like the proton pump inhibitors used to treat reflux, may affect your risk of infection. So in a premature baby in the NICU, using proton pump inhibitors or antacids like ranitidine is not a good idea. There have been clinical evidence and multiple studies have proven that you may have increased risk of sepsis and NEC in such babies. So the prevention of sepsis is mainly from hand hygiene. So now we are in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, and all of us are wearing masks. We are taking extreme precautions for hand hygiene, and obviously extra advantage of all these is that the overall infection rate in the community will come down. So normal seasonal flu rates may come down if we continue to do the same into the flu season as well. So in the neonatal units, hand hygiene is key. Remember that fomites like pen, stethoscope, mobile phones need to be cleaned properly, and avoid handling them when we are going near the patients. And once you are in a sterile field, you shouldn't touch anything around you, and you have to have an assistant for procedures. So this is to just show you the steps of hand washing. And how do we prevent sepsis? Minimal handling, minimizing interventions, strict hand washing and hand hygiene policy. If you are handling central lines or inserting central lines, you have to have care bundles are grouped interventions which have been shown. If they can confirm to it every time and they perform it in the sequence with adequate supervision and documentation, you are likely to reduce the infection rate. Encourage work culture of safety and peer monitoring. So you should be able to tell your colleague off without his getting offended that they didn't wash hands or they should have done it better with asepsis. Breastfeeding, early trophic feeding, progressing to minimize the TPN use, everything reduces the sepsis as well. So patterns of neonatal sepsis, we can categorize sepsis depending on the timing into early onset sepsis, where it's usually onset less than or equal to 5 days of age. Some definitions go up to 7 days. Usually there is a maternal source of infection, and group B streptococcus is a predominant cause. There is a high mortality rate of 5 to 50%. The main presentation is as respiratory distress, and it can be rapidly fulminant. So the screening protocols, maternal prophylaxis are all targeting group B streptococcus in majority of the cases. Now, in premature babies, you may have ESBL, E. coli, and other organisms as well, causing fulminant infection. So risk factors for early onset sepsis include prematurity, maternal fever, or choriamnia neonatus. There is a lot of interest in reducing unnecessary use of antibiotics in babies by overdiagnosing choriamnia neonatus. So we have the III and the sepsis score, which can be done online, sepsis risk score, and we can reduce the use of antibiotics by scoring the risk factors. So group B streptococcus colonization, bacteriuria, previous affected baby with sepsis, these are all risk factors as well. PROM and male gender. Late onset sepsis, where the onset is more than 5 days of age and it's usually acquired from the environment. In a hospitalized preterm baby, it's usually nosocomial and you may have resistant bugs. And in term babies, it's usually community acquired. There is a lesser focus on respiratory presentation, and meningitis has a higher risk up to 30%. So if there is a late onset sepsis, it's safer to do the lumbar puncture. It's recommended. Organism may be E. coli, different serotypes of group B streptococcus, coagulase negative staph more in hospitalized patients, and Staph aureus sepsis, and lower mortality of 3 to 15% is noted. So neonatal infections can be bacterial, fungal, or viral, and the presentations can be depending on the system involved. You may have a septicemic process where the infection spreads all over the bloodstream and it may see different organs. Pneumonia is the commonest presentation, and in late onset sepsis, meningitis can be there. Lesser involvements, otitis media, not commonly seen in the newborns, diarrheal disease, urinary tract infection, osteomyelitis, suppurative arthritis, conjunctivitis, orbital cellulitis, and omphalitis as well. And in terms of etiologic agents, group B streptococcus is a bulk, especially in the developed world, about 40% according to some studies. E. coli, Streptococcus viridans, Staph aureus, Enterococcus, cons, Klebsiella pneumoniae, Pseudomonas cerevisiae, and others. So GBS affects 5 to 35% of pregnant women, depending on which area you live in. 1 in 100 to 1 in 200 colonized women will have an infant with early onset disease. And the incidence is 1 to 7 per 1,000 live births in 1993, and it reduced with the screening and prophylaxis to 0.44 in 1999. So it reduced the risk of GBS sepsis by 70%, the intrapartum screening and prophylaxis. So the approach can be risk factor based, as in UK, where maternal pyrexia, GBS bacteria, positive swab culture in the pregnancy, prematurity, previous baby with GBS sepsis or choriamnia neonatus are taken as risk factors. The CDC recommends group B streptococcus screening at 36 weeks in all pregnancies. That's in the US guidelines. So this is a flow chart that shows whether the baby has signs of neonatal sepsis. Then you have to obviously proceed to full diagnostic evaluation and antibiotic therapy. If there is no sign of sepsis, then you look at the risk factors. If there is maternal chorioamnionitis, as I said, this is being redefined with stricter criteria, and you have other factors that you look into. And if the baby has definite maternal if there is a definite maternal chorioamnionitis, again, limited evaluation without lumbar puncture and antibiotic therapy. Then you look at whether the GBS prophylaxis was indicated for the mother. If no risk factors, you give routine care. If there were risk factors and the mother received adequate more than or equal to 4 hours of the appropriate antibiotics, you just observe the baby for more than 48 hours. If there is inadequate cover with antibiotics and the baby is a term baby, duration of rupture of membrane less than 18 hours, then also you don't need to treat. So this is a change from previous guidelines. If the baby is premature or the duration of rupture was more than 18 hours, then you do limited evaluation and observation for 48 hours and consider antibiotics. Congenital tetanus is just a brief mention. It's not common in the developed world. It's caused by contamination of open areas like the umbilical cord with spores of the Clostridium tetani. And it's still seen in the developing countries with unhygienic delivery conditions and cord care practices. So some areas apply even cow dung to the umbilical area, though it's improving with more awareness now. Immunization has reduced significantly the risk in developed countries as well. In developing world, tetanus toxoid given to the mother during pregnancy reduces the risk in the newborn. Gram-negative infections include E. coli, Klebsiella, Pseudomonas, Serratia, and it's less than 10% of the early onset sepsis, but it contributes to 20 to 30% of late onset sepsis and 30% of neonatal meningitis as well. The mortality is higher in the low birth weight babies, up to 50%. Early diagnosis improves your survival. Meningitis mortality is 20 to 25% for the more than 35 weeks, and in less than 30 weeks, mortality is very high. 50% may have long-term sequelae. The risk of gram-negative infections can come from maternal infection or colonization, and the gut translocation can happen. So a baby with hypoxic ischemic problems or Hirschsprung disease or any other form of gut inflammation may have gram-negative sepsis from gut colonization, and viral gastroenteritis may also be a risk in the extreme preterm babies. It can also be nosocomial, though it's less common than the coagulase negative staph. Gram-negative sepsis often leads to very sick babies with prolonged thrombocytopenia, conjugated jaundice, and gut abnormalities. There is rapidly changing patterns of resistance following antenatal antibiotic use. In fungal infections, it's more seen in extreme preterm babies with central line access and repeated courses of antibiotics leading to fungal colonization. Candida species is a common cause. Very rarely there is Aspergillus species involved. There's involvement of the kidneys with fungal ball, and eyes are involved as well. So fluconazole prophylaxis, nystatin prophylaxis is considered in units with a high incidence of fungal sepsis, though not everyone takes it up, and it's a local unit-based policy. Where there is a low incidence of fungal infection, there is still a high mortality because it's a serious infection. Amphotericin B works against fungal sepsis, and in babies with the risk of nephrotoxicity, we may use the Ambisome, which is a liposomal amphotericin formulation to treat fungal sepsis. Quick run through of viral infections. So CMV is congenital or acquired. Parvovirus may present with severe bone marrow suppression, anemia, and eye drops. Adenovirus leads to congenital pneumonia. Enterovirus is a common cause of aseptic meningitis. High fever is typically seen in enteroviral infections, and baby may be very irritable because of the aseptic meningitis. Coxsackie virus can present sepsis-like presentation or myocarditis. And varicella zoster or chickenpox maternal infection a week before or after delivery puts the baby at very high risk of a sepsis-like presentation. So you will consider varicella zoster immunoglobulin in this setup. Herpes simplex type 2 is a commoner cause, and the risk to the baby is very high with primary infection. Polio, of course, is very rare with effective immunization. So the clinical manifestations can present with lethargy, irritability, temperature instability, hypothermia or fever, poor feeding, hypoxia or cyanosis, tachycardia, abdominal distension, vomiting may be there, loose stools may be there, jaundice, exaggerated unconjugated or conjugated jaundice. Typically in urinary tract infections, you get conjugated jaundice and tachypnea. In clinical manifestations of sepsis, you may have hypotension, apnea, shock, DIC, hepatosplenomegaly, bulging fontanellar seizures, and respiratory distress. Investigations include full blood count, and leukocytosis or leukopenia may be seen. Anemia due to hemolysis or repeated sampling may be seen. Thrombocytopenia in line-related sepsis as well. Thrombocytopenia is a common feature, and abnormal liver function test with thrombocytopenia goes with the gram-negative sepsis. Immature neutrophil count may be seen. It's not very sensitive or specific for acute infections, though neutropenia or leukopenia are more specific. C-reactive protein is an inflammatory marker produced in the liver, and it rises in any inflammatory reaction. The neonatal period sepsis is the most common cause, but it can rise after vaccination, surgery, extravasation, and other causes. There's reasonable sensitivity and specificity of around 70%, and combined with other markers, it may guide. And once the CRP is elevated, its drop may indicate or guide you in the duration of treatment. Procalcitonin is also a useful tool, though a little more expensive, and it rises quicker than CRP. So if CRP is normal in a baby with suspected sepsis, a high procalcitonin may guide you in the treatment. The CRP takes a few hours to rise and peaks over 1 to 2 days. The trend can be monitored as an indicator of response to treatment, and some studies use CRP normalizing as indication to duration of antibiotic treatment, as I mentioned earlier. So TNF-alpha procalcitonin also used similar to CRP, but the faster rise and they normalize sooner. However, they are more expensive. Blood glucose, serum electrolytes, renal function, liver function should be done. And blood culture is, of course, the gold standard, and we should make sure the unit has a policy to collect it in a aseptic manner so there is no contamination. And we should also make sure that adequate sample is sent. At least 0.5 to 1 ml blood sample is needed. Urine culture is more important in late onset sepsis. It's also considered in prolonged jaundice, where especially there is failure to thrive or irritability. A bag urine should not be used, and consider suprapubic aspirator catheterization. Clean catch can be used, but it is time consuming. It's not as accurate as suprapubic or catheterized samples. Cranial ultrasound should be done in preterm babies or those with bleeding manifestations, and blood gas monitoring is important. Use the chest X-ray or abdominal X-ray as clinically indicated. Lumbar puncture should be done before starting antibiotics in any case where the likelihood of sepsis is high. High CRP, positive blood cultures, poor clinical response, neurologic concerns on examination are all indications of lumbar puncture if it is not performed based on the above. If you don't perform the lumbar puncture for any reason, if clinical instability, parental consent, you should clearly document it. The CS of glucose, protein, and cell count, gram stain, and culture are the tests studied. So typically more than 32 white blood cells and more than 60% polymorphonuclear cells is suggestive of meningitis. And the blood glucose, it's higher usually, and CS of glucose less than 50 to 75% of serum glucose is suggestive. A protein level more than 150 milligrams per deciliter, and organisms on gram stain. So management, just to summarize: airway, breathing, circulation stabilization, antibiotic therapy, supportive treatment, intensive care monitoring, incubator care and isolation, ventilation as per supportive need, treat shock appropriately, consider holding feeds in the acute phase but start early, consider fluid restriction, and if you expect a prolonged period of NPO like in NEC, start TPN, and you may have a lower dose of lipids in the early stages of sepsis, in the early stages of treatment of sepsis. Vascular access is important, and we should plan according to the duration of therapy. Some babies with difficult access may need central line. Initiate broad spectrum antibiotics and antivirals as appropriate, but rationalize care based on the progress. This is just a guide on the duration of treatment for sepsis and meningitis. So for GBS sepsis, 7 to 10 days in treatment, and for meningitis, 14 days. Gram-negative infections usually need 3 weeks treatment for meningitis, and Staph aureus also 14 days treatment, and if it's osteomyelitis or septic arthritis, you need up to 6 weeks treatment. Vagalase negative staph, lumbar puncture may not be necessary if baby is clinically well, and 7 to 10 days treatment. However, if you suspect meningitis, lumbar puncture is needed, and antibiotic choice is important as well. Fungal sepsis, you may treat with ambisome or fluconazole plus or minus flucytosine, and 21 days from the first negative culture. It's quite difficult to eradicate in many babies. In terms of outcome, mortality is 20 to 30% overall. It's highest in the premature babies. Morbidity is up to 80% in less than 28 weeks. In meningitis, the mortality is 15 to 30%. Morbidity up to 50%. C. coli may be seen in 5 to 10% a severe neurologic impairment and 30 to 35% with mild to moderate impairment. So to summarize, neonatal infection is a common reason for admission and is a cause of high morbidity and mortality. Preterm babies have multiple reasons, as we discussed. Group B streptococcus is still the predominant organism in early onset sepsis. Blood cultures are positive in only less than 50% of clinically septic babies. So the diagnosis is based on multiple parameters, including the CRP value, procalcitonin, band cell count, and so on. Careful use of antibiotics with emerging risk of multi-resistant bacteria is important to avoid further antibiotic resistance. Thank you.